South, the series, is an audiobook production. It contains subject material not suited for a younger audience. Listener discretion is advised. South, the Pinewood High School incident, is the telling of an unfortunate soul, a young girl lost to the whims of society. We follow the story of Cassidy Learman, a Pinewood High School student, as she finds herself stumbling down a dark and dangerous path. In Allura Shores, corporations control your every thought. It is a place where governments decide where you live and who you talk to, where the best parts of humanity are stripped away, turning the innocent into the monsters we fear the most. The path of darkness is broad and inviting. A banquet of thieves ready to take all you have. Hold true to your beliefs. If you are not careful, someone will replace them with their own. In the previous chapter, Cassidy makes her way from Pinewood to Slayton in a bid to identify Amber's body. Not trusting Jerry was her call, and she felt the need to see her best friend with her own eyes. The trip is a laborious one, thanks to the old woman driver and her smoking habit. But after a pit stop to a hidden cache, Cassidy finds herself stepping foot onto the busy docks of the Slayton port terminal. Not stopping too long to take in the sights, Cassidy makes her way to her first stop and quickly begins her mission. Her connection to Jerry allowing her to cause enough havoc to gain the access she needs to get further into the secured location. Everything goes smooth until she ends up running into the one person she was sure had something to do with the kidnapping. The trafficker named Chris, that she met back when Amber was showing him off to her. Fortunately for her, however, Chris has dealt with too many women and girls to remember her, so she plays on the opportunity and manages to elude his suspicion entirely. That didn't mean that she was in the clear completely, and just as she was getting comfortable with her success, Jerry chimed in with bad news, forcing her to flee the approaching mob of security detail. As if guided by luck, Cassidy managed to evade capture and found herself wandering the port until being guided by Jerry to where she was going to find Amber. Steeling herself for what she was about to witness, Cassidy allowed herself to finish what she started. After a final warning from Jerry, Cassidy opens up a lone shipping container in a decrepit warehouse and finds Amber, at least a part of her. After examining Amber's decapitated head and placing it back into the box she found it in, she is given a pep talk from Jerry, who, in a show of solidarity, opens up the option for her to get back in touch with her wild side. And we're about to find out exactly what she meant by that right now. So, why should we care about what message is conveyed through our art? An upstart in Miss Sarah Gatling's art history class piped up after feeling challenged by the teacher's slideshow presentation. It's all pretentious grandstanding anyway, right? I mean, look at the gaming market as an example. It's all really pretty art, but ultimately it's a means to catch someone's wallet. I suppose you're right. Sarah turned her attention from the slideshow she had spent a good amount of time preparing to look at the student directly. Since you brought it up, let's use video games as an example. Can you tell me what makes the best video games? No. What? The ones that tell stories. She leaned against her desk and folded her arms. The story is the most important part, primarily because it's supposed to teach us something, to convey a message to the consumer, but also to add weight to the world space we're entering. Developers work with a story in the beginning of their development to understand what they are going to build. To come full circle, though, how do they pull your attention to tell this story? The art. Without it, you would be listening to a story play out as opposed to watching it, playing a video game without knowing anything about what's happening around you. Is that not what we are trying to do when we draw and sculpt? We're trying to share a story that can change someone's life. We're adding context that not only helps us figure out what to create, but also help the consumer find meaning in it. A few students wrote some notes to the revelation, while a few others chose to snicker to themselves. Amongst the chatter and scribbles was one of Miss Gatling's brightest pupils, a radiant young girl with golden hair and bright hazel eyes. She raised her hand, and the snickering students went silent. They knew who she was and what she was about. There were rumors in the school about them, the witches of Pinewood High, hiding amongst them with the protection of the school shielding them from any criticism. As their eyes focused on the offense of the girl in all white, Miss Gatling acknowledged her promptly. If that's what we're saying, that we're trying to convey a message through art, then wouldn't that mean that our goal is to sway the minds of the masses? Good observation, Penelope. Miss Gatling straightened herself from her desk. Now we're getting into the realm of propaganda. Someone painting a targeted group or institution in a negative light with the sole goal to sway the public opinion. That's the simpler version, right? Penelope pressed her point. With the power to change a person's choice of food in a grocery store, wouldn't it be possible to push for an extreme? Are you talking about mind control? Miss Gatling generated a few other students' snickers. That's pretty ambitious for a painting or a gum commercial, isn't it? I don't know. Penelope continued to ignore the staring student body surrounding her. Maybe if we were able to take away the person's ability to reason, it would be easier. It's easier to train animals than humans. But humans are animals, right? The class grew silent. Miss Gatling took a minute to file through her mind to rebuke the student's claim, but she couldn't find a way to do it. She cleared her throat and continued with the rest of the slide, after giving Penelope a quick, I guess anything's possible, and avoided asking the class any more questions. Penelope allowed her mind to wander, to think about what the plan was for the homecoming game. But her eyebrows lowered when Cassidy's dying screams echoed through her mind, the cadence of which slowly being drowned out by the ringing of the school bell. That's it for today's lesson, everyone. Miss Gatling retreated. Penelope made her way through the school to her locker on the senior hall and took a moment to adjust her hair and makeup. It wasn't like she needed to do it, but she felt like the task would help her relax. Ever since that night, deep in Pinewood, she hadn't been able to fully rest. The shadows of the night reaching out to her as if to punish her for what they've done. They had killed Cassidy and left her body to be eaten by wildlife, a thought that kept haunting her despite the many purification rituals and chants she conducted. She felt like she wasn't alone, that somehow she was being haunted by the dead witch of wrath. Roar! Penelope barely kept her scream from traveling past the senior hall as the sudden jolt from Heather and Tara forced her to cover her mouth. She looked at them hard as she gathered herself by clinging to her locker. It was all a sick joke to them. The blood that they shed for the preservation of their coven was something to not make a mockery of. Yet here they were, quickly distancing themselves from the act of betraying one of their own. As she listened to them prattle on about their successful spells and the upcoming game, she nodded and smiled where appropriate, but she still felt the pull of guilt eating away at her spirit. Penny, back me up here, Heather chimed in to break her from her dark thinking. If all we have to do is sell 25 units, then we should try to attract the crowd using incense. Or should we use the food? We're calling on earth magic, so we should be able to get away with food offerings. Her lack of enthusiasm finally caught the attention of the other girls. Hey, what's up? Tara looked at Heather. It's a small pool nowadays, so if something's going on. Really? Her chest tightened. And whose fault is that? Penny, chill. Heather commanded more than scold. Not here. Then where? She slammed her locker door, which caused a few of the passing students to gasp. We've been pretending like nothing happened for too long. Let's go to Hadley's room, okay? Heather's frustration was about to spill over. Penny, you know this isn't where we should be talking about this. Tara tried to intervene. Besides, you're in this with us. None of us want to get in trouble, so let's talk in private, okay? Later, when the school was clear of the normal traffic, the three of them were met by Gabriella at Hadley's classroom. The sun had begun to set, casting the school in a deep shade of orange, the shadows of swaying pine trees dancing along the walls of the social study teacher's room. When they had all sat down, Heather tried to call for them to cleanse the space, but Penelope interjected. We're not at peace, sisters. She glared around the room. Ever since that night, things have not been right. What have you been feeling, Penelope? Gabriella folded her arms. I can't stop feeling like we've been cursed. I can't relate, Heather smirked. Here, let's put it all out in the open. We killed her. Cassidy was going to do this coven no good. We had a golden opportunity to switch things up, and that's what we did. I get it, Penny. Tara decided to ease the tension. Maybe you were right. We probably should have gone back to make sure. But that would have been more suspicious if we were caught by someone. There's no way she would have survived that attack. And even if she did, it wasn't like we were the ones that actually hit her. James is still on camera attacking her, so we're good. Penelope took her time to look at each of them. They looked like the typical mean girls of any high school, folded arms and slanted gaze, aimed at the annoyance in the room. She wasn't going to be their favorite anymore, that much was for certain. But she still needed them. It was true, they were all accomplices in the crime, but neither of them wanted to come clean and honest. For all of her rebellion, she knew that neither of them would escape persecution if they folded now. She only wished that she didn't feel so uncomfortable. She wished that the nightmares, hearing Cassidy's dying pleas for help, would stop. While we're here, I think that we should talk about our plans for the game in detail. Gabriella moved the meeting along. The goal is to get as many of the attendees to buy as many units as possible. Hatley told us that we're going to get a cut for our future projects, so we need to get as much attention as we can. If we're going to do that, we'll need to make sure that our attraction spell is proper and that we're all in unison with the casting. Do we all agree that we'll call on Earth like Penny suggested? They all nodded. That said, we've been gifted a good amount of hot dogs and hamburgers from Southern Cuts, so we shouldn't have a problem burning some of them as the offering. That's a weird way to go about spellcraft, Gabby. Heather folded her arms with a chuckle. My grandma would spit at us if she found out. Well, it's a good thing she's still in Europe. Gabriella leaned back in her chair. Okay, are we all set for this weekend? Penelope, I know that what we've done is hard to live with, but that's why we've chosen this path. We are a sisterhood that works together for the betterment of each other. Cassidy's tale is a cautionary reminder that causing separation in the group can bring about your own destruction. Are you going to be okay moving forward? Yeah. She didn't like being threatened, but there wasn't any other way out. Good. Gabriella looked around the room again. Does anyone else have anything they want to bring up while we're gathered? Just one last thing. The voice of their leader came from near the doorway. Penelope shivered at the thought of having to talk about the killing again, but resigned herself to wrapping her arms around her stomach to brace for Lydia's inquisition. I suppose that it's not a secret anymore. We're set to distribute a good amount of the gifted meat product throughout the community. How have you all enjoyed working with it? It was simple enough. Heather led the conversation. We managed to follow the instructions pretty well with James, so we should be able to use it on anyone going forward. It helps that everyone's been trained by the hum of the PA system. It's still weird though, right? Tara chimed in. Like how she was able to speak with it, use it. What if we come across someone like her again? The room grew back into silence at the memory of their disgraced member. Penelope thought back to when they had first met Cassidy, how bright-eyed and green she was at entering her true power. It had scared her how in tune she seemed to be, able to heal faster than a normal person, with increased strength and speed. They were told that it was a random occurrence, but Tara was right. They wouldn't be able to do anything against someone else that was mutated by the algae. As the girls searched their brains for a rebuttal, Lydia spoke up to reassure them of their efforts. Southern Cuts has spent a lot of money getting us to this point, girls. She stopped at her desk. Make no mistake. After sharing all of the information we gathered on Cassidy, They have worked out a way for us to deal with any future irregularities. Be sure to keep an eye out, though. There's someone else working to mess up our project. She's slippery, but I know she's been busy." What do you mean, Mother?" Penelope was genuinely concerned. "We've been pretty careful recently." "I have a sneaking suspicion. That's all." Lydia looked out at the setting sun as she spoke. "Ghosts have a tendency to pop up from out of nowhere." The other girls left the school with cheerful expressions and bouts of laughter, all of them carrying themselves as if they were the icons of innocence, except for Penelope. Nothing that was talked about in their meeting had made her feel any better about what had gone down that night on the back roads. She called a ride share to get home instead of riding with the others. She needed some space from their acting. When she was near her home, she began to gather her things while thanking the old woman who picked her up. Even as she began to cough loudly, the woman wouldn't stop smoking, which made her want to leave the car as fast as possible. When she did, she promptly left her the lowest rating she could before walking up to her home in disgust. The home with the white facade was so inviting to her that she felt as though a heavy weight was lifted off of her the instant she crossed the threshold. She removed her shoes and discarded her things at the front door. There was no need to worry about her family. They were doing their best to avoid being in America anyway. She ignored the darker corners of the home, choosing to focus exclusively on the front room that was deeper within. When she reached the luxurious room, she plopped onto the large fabric couch she often fell asleep on and prepared to do just that. Before she could get too comfortable, however, her stomach growled. Dinner was a simple matter, a microwavable pasta meal and leftover chicken breast that she cooked a few days ago. When the meal was warmed, she didn't hesitate and began to indulge, taking her time with each bite until all that remained was the ceramic plate she didn't feel like washing. She walked back over to the couch to continue her nightly ritual by turning on the TV. As she watched the block of advertisements in between a teen drama about werewolves, her phone rang. She wanted to ignore it. There was nothing good to talk to anyone about at 8:30 at night, but her curiosity led her to see who would dare disturb her at that time. When she picked up her phone, she let out a sigh before answering it. What? She didn't feel like being pleasant. You know what? Heather reminded her. Don't flake on us, Penny. You know what we did was necessary. And she hung up and went back to her show. The frustration she felt at knowing she would never be free of her part in the crime had seemed too much, but she could do nothing about it at that point. She tried to let the show take her mind off it again, but it barely did anything to help. Once she had gotten about halfway through the second episode, her phone rang again. It wasn't fear or regret at that point. Now she felt that the girls were being petty. She reached for the phone to give Heather a piece of her mind, but when she answered and tried to finally confront that annoying girl, she was met with silence. Hello? Penelope felt the shiver. The phone call ended. Penelope knew who it was instantly and began to panic. She thought about calling the others, but they wouldn't be able to get to her in time. She went to call the police, But then she thought about what that would mean for the crime they committed. She was alive, though, so that wouldn't matter. She tried to reason. Her large home suddenly felt like a prison as she thought on how she could make the situation work out in her favor. She pondered whether or not she could reason with her. But as she continued to struggle, she heard something. "She's here." Heavy footsteps echoed from the upper part of her house, which caused Penelope's stomach to drop. She jumped up from the couch and tried to rush to the kitchen where she could get a knife or something to defend herself. Just as she retrieved the chef's knife, the power was cut, casting her in complete darkness. She couldn't catch her breath, her heart trying to run away from what was about to happen to her. In a bid to try and see Cassidy coming, she used her phone's flashlight while strolling to Heather's number. There was no signal. "Cassidy?" Penelope inched away from the kitchen. "Come on, Cassidy. This isn't how you get revenge. You're alive, right? We can figure something out. Let's talk about it." Penelope's thoughts were only on escaping the house as she maneuvered through the dark two-story estate. She didn't know exactly where she was, but Cassidy was sure to make some noise before reaching her, so all she felt she needed to do was stay away from the footsteps. As she tried her hardest to listen, however, she couldn't hear anything, footsteps or otherwise. When she felt like she was in the clear, Penelope made a dash for the front door. Before she left the living room, however, a blood-curdling shriek made her legs feel like jelly, and she tripped on air. "No, please." Penelope caught the irony of her plea as she reached for her phone, which slid just a few feet in front of her. The crawl was agony. A twisted ankle was her punishment for not being more confident in her escape. She managed to make it to her phone, at least, and used it to aid her in locating her attacker. When the light fell on Cassidy, she wished that she could unsee the girl. Blood-red eyes and flushed skin was slightly obscured by disheveled hair and dripping sweat. She was reminded of how the girl looked at the rally when she attacked the police officers and knew, before she lunged at her, that she was going to kill her. To her surprise, however, Cassidy didn't outright attack her. The girl closed her eyes and took a few deep breaths before reopening them to reveal a somewhat normal-looking Cassidy. Penelope was shocked to see that she was in such control of her state and, barring the obvious attempt on her life, wanted to know how she did it. As if to read her mind, Cassidy opened her mouth to speak, but stopped herself before she could say anything. It looked as though she were talking to someone, maybe over a wireless earpiece, but as she looked on, she noticed that she was talking to herself instead. "Hey, Cass." Penelope took the opportunity to try getting to her feet for a sprint to the door. "It wants to kill you." Cassidy, although not looking at her, made Penelope reel in fear at the statement. "Oh, okay." She managed to get to her knees. "What did you call it before?" "The Ander demon. Remember what Lydia said about spirits? Don't let it take control of you." "Control." Cassidy maintained her attention on the demon while talking to her. "We're sharing." Penelope gathered as much willpower as she could, and forced her legs to carry her to the front door as fast as possible. She made it to the handle and threw open the door to a window of hope in escaping the monster of their making. Before she could force her way out of the house, however, she felt Cassidy's arm wrap around her neck with enough force to lift her off of the floor. Thanks to the light from the street lights outside, she was able to see the interior of her home from an upside-down angle before being knocked unconscious by the impact of landing on her head. She could feel the pain, although she was still unconscious, the light tapping of some liquid bringing her attention to her reality. When she opened her eyes, she thought she had gone blind somehow, the dark room she was in shooting a sliver through her trembling body. It was only when she heard the chattering of a madwoman nearby that she was able to focus her vision a bit more. Although the garage was dark, there were a few emergency lights that lined the nearby shelves her dad installed years ago. It was because of said lights that she was able to identify the dripping noise that awoke her, the blood that was dripping from the open wound on her head. Cassidy, she groaned as she fought against the pulsing pain. She didn't get a response, at least not a normal one, as when Cassidy had heard the girl speak, she began to approach her with heavy breath. The mad girl got up close to Penelope and stopped just shy of her face, the interaction allowing her to see what she was toying with in her hands. Glimmering with the limited light of the garage, the knife she tried to kill Cassidy with was now the girl's plaything. She knew that she was going to need to choose her words carefully. The fact that she was still alive, meaning that Cassidy could possibly be reasoned with. Pushing past the pain, she took in a bit of the stale garage air in preparation of pleading for her life. Listen. Cassidy stopped her. Do you hear it? Please, Penelope began to cry. It wasn't me. I didn't want to do it. I know how weak that sounds, but I really didn't want you to die. I still don't. Despite the appeal, Cassidy was not hearing her. The girl was trapped in what had seemed to be an inner monologue with herself. It wasn't until Penelope tried to wiggle her hands free of the duct tape bounding them that Cassidy piped back up with the rest of what she was going to say. She knew she needed to play along with whatever the girl was going to say, but there was an underlying feeling of dread that she couldn't shake. Cassidy looked at her, a twisted and cruel grin breaking the illusion of innocence and causing the feeling of dread to sow into a fear that made her certainty of survival waver. Let me guide you through a meadow. What do you want from me, Cassidy? Penelope felt angry at her lack of options. You were so weak when we found you. You practically begged us to help you overcome your past, but now you're angry that we protected ourselves from your rabbit hole of a vendetta. You were the one that needed us, not the other way around, and you betrayed our faith in you. Cassidy looked at her with a confused expression before turning away to approach a nearby shop stool. When she sat down, she appeared almost as normal as she did before things between them fell apart. her expression resembling that of a girl who was getting over a mutual breakup. Penelope thought it uncanny how a person could be back from the dead with such a calm expression, but she quickly remembered who she was thinking about. Cassidy was not like any other girl. She was more akin to a monster than man, and she desperately needed to get as far away from her as possible. Well, this is awkward. Cassidy slanted her head sideways and crimped the edge of her mouth to one side, like she was trying to force a laugh at the end of a comedy bit. How? The question waited to leave Penelope's tongue in case Cassidy became hostile again. You didn't have it back then. You'd be surprised what a back alley herbalist can do with support from a cyber criminal. Cassidy's words came out like they were untrained dogs that broke from their leash. I just wish the pain would... Cassidy dropped the knife and grabbed her head while screaming as loud as she could, causing Penelope's gaze to dart towards the only thing she could use to escape. There it was, her opportunity to shift control of the situation and finally get rid of the failed witch. She managed to slow her heartbeat as Cassidy pleaded with the Anderdemon, the pitiful display causing Penelope's eyes to narrow at the witch's poor mental health. When it had looked like Cassidy would remain in control for a bit longer, she addressed them both and braced herself for a fight. What did you expect would happen, Cassidy? She managed to pull the girl's attention. It wasn't a complete recovery, and now your mind is eating itself. That isn't supposed to happen with bacteria, with the blood-brain barrier and all. But the isotope can get up there. That's what's happening, Cassidy. The isotope is acting like a virus that's slowly eating your brain. I can help you, though. I know how we can get it to stop turning your brain into pudding. All we need is the right signal. Cassidy stopped arguing with the demon and looked at her with a sharp glare. It was enough to make Penelope rethink her plan, but she was determined to, at least, get free of the chair. Once she did that, she would stab her with the knife before making a run for it. Cassidy retrieved the knife, however, and approached Penelope as though she were ready to cut her intestines out. Instead of her doing that, though, she leaned in and put her lips to Penelope's ear to whisper. The knife pointed to the left of her torso. Help me, sister. Yes, that's right. Penelope nearly leapt at the chance. Just untie me, and we'll recreate the frequency that allowed you to use the Anderdemon freely. You'll be free to do whatever you want with us, Cassidy. You'll have all the power. That's what you wanted, right? Power. The power to take down whatever you want. No one will be able to stop you from taking what's yours. Let me go, and I'll do everything I can to help you do what you wish. Be it spellcraft, mind control, murder, whatever it is. Please, Cassidy, let me go. Cassidy examined her from head to toe, as though she were looking for some indication of the lie Penelope was spinning. Although that was the exact thought she had going through her head, she made a great effort to not let Cassidy pick up on it. Her head was facing away from the girl's forced examination, as though she were trying to breathe different air. This went on for too long until, as though bored, Cassidy did what she didn't expect and cut Penelope's hands and legs free. Thank you. Penelope could barely believe it herself. Thank you, Cassidy. I swear that we'll find a way to get you help before, you know. Cassidy helped her to her feet and looked at her a little longer before doing the last thing Penelope thought she would. She handed her the knife. It happened so bluntly that she didn't know what to do at first. Her initial reaction was to look at it as though she had never seen a blade before. When her wanderlust was abated, she turned her attention to the girl in front of her and tensed herself a little to prepare for a lunge. Before she indicated her intentions, however, Cassidy spoke up with the words that didn't make much sense to her, but she found herself listening regardless. I thought that it was all pointless before. Cassidy's expression was one of disappointment. I went through a lot over such a short period of time, and now I don't feel anything anymore. I found her head, Penelope. I don't know why you all decided to do that, but it doesn't matter now. Wait, what? Penelope, feeling like she had the upper hand, gave into her curiosity. We didn't. There's so much going on, Penelope. Too many people are trying to get over on everyone else that they forget that there are people in the middle that just want to live in peace. All I wanted was to live a normal life, a life with my family and Amber, where we would just be normal. Look at me, Penelope. Look at what I've become. I can't say that I'm a victim, but that isn't really the truth, right? Penelope shook her head as she gripped the knife as tight as she could. You've become what you've always wanted to be, Cassidy. I had you figured out the second you joined the coven. You've done nothing but show how angry and bitter you were, how desperate for attention and affection you were. That's why it was so easy for Lydia to use you. Despite the isotope or the algae, you were going to end up here at some point anyway. Maybe not with me exactly, but it would have been someone. You hold nothing but yourself sacred. We witches hold everything around us sacred, but not you. You're an animal, Cassidy. Worse than that, actually. You're a monster. The two witches allowed the space around them to grow still as they stared into each other's eyes. Cassidy's blank gaze shot through Penelope as though she were inspecting her soul. Penelope held her attention on Cassidy's frame to spot any slight movement, any indication of a twitch, to justify her lunge at her. As soon as she thought it, her opportunity presented itself in the form of the girl wrinkling her nose as if to scratch it. She darted forward to end the standoff, and, just as she suspected, her opponent's reaction was to strike as well. Neither of them knew what the outcome was going to be, but she was certain that her story wouldn't end there. She still had the knife. She still had more to do, and she was the only one that could see it through to the end. Now that the two girls have come to terms with their convictions, there is no telling what is going to happen next. Who is going to come out on top of this clash? With the fate of the school and the game attendees at stake, it seems as though it's all coming down to who wants it more. I guess we'll have to wait until next time to see who survived. Thank you for listening to South, the Pinewood High School Incident. If you are enjoying the series, please leave a like, follow, and comment in the appropriate areas. It's crazy to see that we're at chapter 18 now, and I feel like we're going to need to keep going for at least 10 more chapters to really get into the craziness of this story. Unfortunately, this is the third to last chapter of the book. At least this is a 10-part series, so there is hope on the horizon at least. You can follow me on X at the writer Wesley, YouTube at Wesley the writer, and I'll be updating my email soon via Gmail, so get ready to flood my inbox. Thank you again, and I can't wait to continue our story next time. But until we get there, remember, the mind is the battleground. Be careful which side you give aid. Later.